Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
I already hit the button. Actually,
Okay.
I just hit the button, so we just started.
All right.
I'm pumped that you're here.
Super cool to be here, Andy. Good
Yeah,
to
we
know
have
you.
we have so much to talk about. Let alone the fact that we grew up probably 30 miles from each other.
Right, that's crazy.
It is crazy, but you know what? That's happened to me more often than not.
Really?
Even though I don't consider Santa Cruz to be Northern California,
Right.
I looked at a map and I find it to be directly in the middle, but people call it NorCal.
Right.
There's a lot of connections from NorCal.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in the Silicon Valley?
I did. I literally grew up in South San Jose, so Morgan Hill,
Yep.
San Martin, the whole Gilroy, the garlic capital.
Yeah.
Probably smell it in my pores still. It's only been a
Yes.
year since I've been up here, full time. But yeah, not far from you. Spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz, on the boardwalk, on the beach, in the water. Dude, it's crazy that we're both from there, and most of the career in that area as well. So
It's amazing. So I listened to your podcast with Joe, and I've always found that the best way to start off is just to let you introduce yourself, because
Sure.
the odds of me just completely murdering it
Right.
are exceptionally high, almost
Gotcha.
guaranteed.
Okay, right.
So
on.
I'll let you give me an intro, and then we're just going to dive right in.
Okay. Yeah, my name's John Norris Jr. I'm a very recently retired lieutenant with California Department of Fish and Wildlife in our old state. Had a pretty amazing career, a really blessed one, real diverse one. Started back in 1992 down in Riverside County.
Yep.
Kind of the SoCal LA basin area, the Inland Empire actually, and started patrol down there. And then eventually worked back up to the Silicon Valley, which was home. So about 95, I got back in my home area. And I was doing game warden work in my home area, which was fantastic. All the areas I learned to hunt, hike,
awesome.
the Santa Cruz Mountains, mountain biking and hiking where you and I learned, and then Henry Coast State Park, just over the hill.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I met a game warden, and got inspired to even do the job, and learned all my backpacking skills in there, even as I was becoming a hunter at a youthful age. And then to go back there in 95 and be the game warden on patrol now was kind of a dream, kind of back in the hometown,
Yeah.
And spent the majority of the next 13 years right there. In 2005, I promoted to lieutenant, so I was supervising a squad of about 7 game wardens, 2.5 counties, had all of San Benito, Santa Clara, a little bit of Monterey County, and then just kept, doing all the traditional game warden stuff, the hunting and the fishing enforcement, stream bed alteration, the environmental crime. Something we love to do as hunters, I'm sure you'll relate to, is the whole hunter education thing.
Yep.
Outreach and teaching kids. I mean, just having a ball doing all that, traditional stuff. And then in 2004, when I found that first, Mexican cartel poison cannabis grow right on the edge of Henry Co Park, everything took just a complete 90-degree shift, and we went into a very unconventional, area for game wardens to go, and then spent, the rest of my career in special operations developing a one-off team that we haven't had in the country yet as far as game wardens go, strictly as a special operations force dedicated to fighting that type of threat, both environmentally, as dangerous as those guys are, and also the destructive nature of what they're doing to our wildlife and waterways and our wildlands. Just horrible stuff. And yeah,
I got to be honest, I was completely blown away. And for those of you who are listening to this, I would recommend going back and listening to your episode with Rogan, because it was blowing my mind consistently.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about game wardens. I
Right.
mean, if you listen to most people, they're like, stay away from them.
Yeah.
Which I met one through Dudley in Iowa. He was awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sure it probably depends on the interaction you have with
Sure.
the game warden and how you interact with them.
Yeah.
But I was amazed at I guess the term would be the authorities that a warden has, that I had no
crazy.
idea. The scope and roles and responsibilities. So could you explain even how you become a warden and the pipeline that you go through, and then kind of an overarching explanation
Sure.
of the roles and responsibilities? Because I suspect most people have no idea how broad it is.
Yeah. It's crazy how little people know, like you're saying, Andy, when you get to the game warden profession, because really there's not a lot of us, in the nation, much less each individual state.
I've encountered 0 so far in 3 years hunting, other than, like I said, Dudley's game warden in Iowa. I have yet to run into one in the field or to check a tag. So I know they're out there.
They're out there, but they're just, where's the unicorn, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about the thin green line. You heard me say it on Joe's podcast,
Yep.
and I talk about the thin green line being so thin. Obviously, public lands, are getting hit by so many more people. The population has boomed in the nation. I mean, since I was the start of my career in 92, what has the population in California done? I mean, it's just skyrocketed,
yeah.
and the other parts of the country. So you don't often see game wardens. When you do, it's kind of stressful and unnerving, even if everything's totally legal, right?
Are we in trouble?
Yeah. But the thing about it is, it's interesting is game wardens are just like you and I as hunters. I mean, we love to see guys like you and me. Like, if I'm going to go check you and you're in an elk camp, and you just got your first bow kill on a big bull. Congratulations, man. That was epic. And what was going on that big bull we were dialoguing on before the show. If I came into that camp, it would be a celebration. You guys are squared away.
Yep.
Everything's legal. You're stewards of conservation. You're out there because of reach and public access and so many people tuning into what we're all doing. We're spreading that conservation message so much more broader in a positive way. And even if you're not a hunter, and you're a preservationist, animal rights, whatever the case may be, and I, talk to both groups to educate equally, it puts a positive light on what we're doing as conservationists and why it's so critical to keeping our wildlife species going. So as far as contacting a guy like you or a legal ethical hunter, it's not adversarial at all. Allies, eyes and ears, force multipliers, like you and I would say from operational work. But there's that 1 in 1,000 that's 20 miles in the backcountry.
Yeah.
He's a felon, in possession of like an AK-47, has a huge...
Which is a great hunting rifle, by the way.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really
you steal
useful.
core ammo, man, just go to work, man, like Taliban, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing that gets so crazy in games. We got to come up against that. And a lot of times as a game where you got to do it alone. You don't have backup. You're in your truck by yourself. You might have your patrol dog, a canine. I might have my yellow lab Apollo with me, and she's a sniff dog. She's not going to bite anybody. But that's it, So game wardens have the unique requirements on their job to be able to sort through hellacious circumstances by themselves without any support. It's kind of sound familiar, right?
Yep.
From the old team days. And that's what game wardens do domestically. And, we try to double up. We try to get backup, but we're so thin on a deer opener or an elk season or whatever, we can't combine forces that much, or we can't cover that much ground. Becoming a game warden isn't a real easy process. As an example, when I was hired in 1992, being a white male, and even though I had great grades, I had the criminal justice degree, I was finished my bachelor's at San Jose State, was in my master's program waiting to get hired by Fish and Wildlife. And because I was a white male and I didn't have veteran preference points because I wasn't in the military, it was a long wait. And we had like about 300 game wardens at the time in the state, and we get like 10,000 applicants a year for the job.
How many openings per year on average?
4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah. So
and
the
maybe
the
some
odds are
years,
not in your favor.
They're not in your favor. And some years you'll go with, we weren't hiring anybody. So from about 1989 to 92, there was a big hiring freeze, recession stuff going on, and they weren't hiring anybody. So they were stacking people up on the list. And just because myself and 3 other civilian guys scored high enough on all the testing, we got in with some military veterans that have preference points and some guys already with law enforcement, state law enforcement jobs like lifeguards and state park guys down in San Diego, Southern California. I got into that academy just by the sheer numbers of just lucking out. So it's tough to get into. Educational requirements are not overly stringent, but usually it's a bachelor's in a criminal justice or wildlife science or an associate's. But it's everything else we go through in a police academy.
Is it a separate academy for wardens, or do you pipeline through the LEO type academies?
Now they're all our own.
Okay.
Back then, I was actually the 4th academy of having our own in '92. And so most states are that way now, where you have your own fish and game academy specifically to be a game warden, but in that academy, you do the full 6 months that the California Highway Patrol would do, or San Jose Police, or Lincoln County or Flathead County Sheriffs. So you get all of that stuff because you got to be a mainline law enforcement officer and protect everything and enforce everything. And then you do anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks of what we call game warden specific training. That's wildlife forensics, wildlife ID, weapons familiarization. And instead of just learning a few weapons like we might to operate as a cop, we're going to learn hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of systems, because we might run across a crazy old Mauser bolt gun, an AK. You might see this, archaic old, antique rifle, and you got to unload it. You got to handle it safely, and you got to know what you're up against if it turns crazy. So we go through all of that training as well before we get kicked out. So the training's pretty stringent, and you're very diversely trained to kind of handle everything.
Do you, at the end of that, I'm just thinking with my law enforcement buddies that I have, they have that pretty robust period after an academy where they have their FTO, their field training officer.
Yep.
Do you guys get that, or are you so thinly staff that it's like, congratulations, John, here's your district.
Well, here's this funny, Andy. I'll date myself a little bit, but my mentors, the guys that I grew up kind of idolizing as I was going through training, were all FTOs. But when they started 20 years before, it was like, you get to the academy and they go, okay, jump in the truck. You jump in like a captain. Here's a code that's about this thick, maybe 100 regulations. Here's a 6-gun, a sedan to go off-road. Good luck with that.
Perfect.
And then you just go learn, and it's trial by fire. It's crazy. But when I got in, there was a real stringent FTO program. It had just kind of started. And that was where we would, provided you graduate and make all the cuts, all the curriculum, pass all the tests, now we're going to go with a different trainer in all different parts of the state for a month each. And we're going to do 3 of them. So I was on the coast in Fort Bragg, North Coast, right, working with a warden named Bob Cusera, who's an amazing marine expert, great off water, offshore.
Yep.
And I had done some of that, but I had not done extensive offshore work, either recreationally or professionally. So I learned a ton. I was just like out of my element and learned a lot with him, and he really kind of kicked my butt on getting it right. And then I ended up in the Eastern Sierras with a guy named John Ortman, and he was just, legendary. He came and did stress inspections during our academy, and I got to know this guy through my TAC officer, and I went, oh man, a little intimidating. This guy's all that, right? And I got to do this, like the X1C, all the C-zone openers at like 12, 13,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
On the White Mountains bordering Nevada. All those deer seasons were going on, working spotlighters in that, the Eastern Sierras. It was amazing. So I got a good diverse training, and most everybody in the state now do at least 3. If they're having problems, they might do another one.
Okay.
And they're a month long, and they're spread out. And that way, when you hit the ground as a quote-unquote solo warden and you've passed all of those FTO program requirements, you're pretty likely to make it through probation for your first year because you've been evaluated in every category. We have 26 to 30 categorical ratings with a bunch of narration daily for 30 days. So, the stress is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
For a trainer, being an FTO myself, I trained like 8 cadets as a training officer before I promoted. That's their time. It's just like going through our basic training when we start. So we're diving in as hard as the trainee is, and we really want them to succeed unless there's a critical issue where they shouldn't.
That's an unbelievable knowledge base. I forget, because I'm not a avid fisher, that you guys are also responsible for the...
Got to do that too, yeah.
Yeah, when I think Warden, I'm just thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be... we're a landlocked animal. And
right.
Yeah, I forget you have to have all that knowledge too. Last year, talking about the conservation, I don't know. So we were at the same camp. It was tied directly into that bull that's on the wall.
Nice.
Which I killed on 9/11, so his name's Bin Laden, obviously.
I like it, man. He's gorgeous, yeah.
Killed him late in the night.
Okay.
And we wanted to bring more horsepower in, man-packed horsepower, basically another buddy. The next day, so quartered, hung it, backstraps, center lines, took out everything that we could take in a really big backpack.
Nice.
Got back out. We went back up the next morning, and Dudley saw a flash of a brown bear taking off from the gut pile.
Yeah. He found it. Yeah.
He did, and it was in an area where there had been grizz in the past, but they hadn't been seen in over 100 years. And I don't know if it was Dudley or Barklow that communicated, but it somehow got back. And I don't know if it was a warden that showed up or somebody that was somehow tied into the conservation. But a guy showed up on a 4-wheeler when we were back in camp and asked if we would go put a trail camera back up on the gut pile, which I'm not a huge fan of grizzly bears, to be totally honest with you.
Not when they're on a gut pile near you.
I've only had some sporadic encounters. It's very interesting. In my limited hunting experience, black bears, my level of comfort with them is okay. Because every time I see them and I'll make some noise, they take off. Yeah. The 2 times that I've seen a grizz, I immediately realized who was in charge of that situation, and it was not me.
Right.
The aura that they put out was just
intense.
instantaneous alpha.
Yep.
So we agreed to go back up in the interest of trying to see whether or not the grizz had come back in. And it was just, and again, it might well have actually been the game warden for that area, but either way, it was really cool to just not in an interest of hunting at all. It was no benefit to us because we had come out, taken everything out. We had quartered it, hiked it out the next day. It was the day after. Yeah. And when we got back up there again, it was buried, which it hadn't been the day before. Yep. Got a camera up there and then got the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah, when they're on a kill like that and they're kind of taking territory and they're staking a claim, that's a tough go. And now in our state of Montana, we have brown bear all over the place, and up in the northwest corner, without going too specifics, which we'll share off the broadcast. But we've got so much brown bear now dumped into that area, problem bears from Glacier, right in my hunting holes where I'm putting trail cameras out yesterday, getting ready for the big fall season. And, adequate weapon, watch your six, you don't know, and getting an animal
I went in there
down.
with some substantially more firepower when we went back up. I'll say one of the three of us was far less pumped to go up there. I won't name any names. People can take a guess.
I can take a guess on that.
Yeah, and it ended up being color-phased.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. Well, we didn't find out till much later.
Yeah.
But I just was thinking when you were talking about the conservation piece and being a steward, like I said, we took half of a day to go do that, just in the interest of gathering information so they could determine whether or not the Grizz had migrated back, because it was near White Sulphur.
Okay.
I want to say it's the Cascade mountain range, but I think that's wrong. I don't have that much time out there, but it was the mountain ranges that was like southeast of White Sulphur, White Castle.
Yeah, I know I know that range.
The Grizz
gorgeous country.
It's
and
amazing.
Active in black, brown bear, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was oh man, it was hilarious when we put the camera up. Just looking around, and like I said, one of the three of us was far less.
Little perimeter.
One of the three of us was far less pumped to be there.
Yeah. Well, you have to share that conversation with him when the time's right.
I will.
Yeah.
So when you got into being the game warden, obviously, again, I was fascinated by listening to you talk with Joe. The things that you did in the tail end of your career, I would never have associated with the role and responsibility of game warden.
Crazy. Yeah.
And I know we'll get into that. So before it shifted into that, though, was being a game warden what you thought it would be?
It was more challenging, honestly, brother. There was so much more to the job, than I entailed and really thought about. When I'll take it back to the FTO program, I was so overwhelmed with all the responsibilities that we had to do in the traditional world. Before we get into the special operations stuff and that cartel threat that we're alluding to, just going out and being an effective game warden, like taking on spotlighters at night. The big thing in the academy was to make yourself, to become that game warden that has that type of reputation of being a hardcore go-getter, going to go after a real poacher, not someone that just forgets their fishing license and you walk up out of the truck, you're high visibility.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you write them a ticket, they don't have their license, or a couple undersized fish, whatever. Important issues, got to educate. Sometimes you sight, sometimes you don't. I wanted to go get the guys that were really intentional. I mean, obviously being a hunter since I was like 9 years old, my dad put me through hunter safety. I really valued the law, even before I knew about the job. I wanted to do it right. You talk conservation stewardship, what we all are, and how much we love to be out there. And we'll hump our butts out there harder to make sure we take every piece of meat, educate people.
Oh, you're not leaving it behind if
no.
if you sourced it yourself.
Yeah, right.
Like, hey, scrape that off.
Yeah, hey, that's stew meat, man. Yeah. I can get a lot out of boning that out.
I got room in my backpack. I'll take breaks. It's fine. Put it in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But my thing was I wanted to go after the guys that were intentional. Like they knew where the game warden was living. They knew how to outsmart him or her. They would go out at night behind lock gates on private ranches and kill trophy bucks out of season, or they'd throw bait down and just bring in massive amounts of deer that don't even belong in the area. So they're not only killing deer illegally over bait and maybe in or out of season or after dark, but they're actually changing the biodiversity, the actual herd dynamics of that species. And coming from, the first deer I ever harvested as like a 14-year-old kid was a blacktail coastal buck where you and I grew up.
That's awesome.
And just a little crab claw fork that I worked my butt off, and I got buck fever so much I shook, and I kind of shot him, a little far back, and I had to track him, but fortunately it all worked out. And how much I just respected that process. And when I had that deer meat and harvested it and prepared it, and we had meat for a year in the family, such a rite of passage, and I look at it as a privilege, as everybody should that ethically hunts, being the conservation model. But to think guys were going out there and just cheating by throwing truckloads of bait, behind a lock gate that they never think they're going to get checked. Yeah. And they're bringing in these monster 22, 24-inch 4-points. A buck you and I in California would dream and wait a lifetime to do legally. And there's 6 of them eating on the pile on one ranch. And it's like, well, that's the genetics for 6 bucks that should be spread out over maybe as much as 6 miles, making that herd so much better. And what
Would
are they
take
doing?
all 6 of them too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
And what they'll do is they'll just selectively wait, and they'll work over the bait. So that became kind of the specialty when I got back to Silicon Valley after 3 years of being on the job. And I started to find these cases. And they're tough as heck to make, because ultimately you got to get into an area that you got eyes on everything. And these guys know the game warden's truck, so we're having to sneak in covertly, doing a lot on foot, just like a backpack do-it-yourself elk hunt. Make a hide on a border, use stealth, field craft, camouflage to get in, and surveil and watch. Sometimes, 24 hours, sometimes 6 weeks. It just depended. And my first big baiting case was in 1995. It was my first full year back in the Silicon Valley. And the warden that had vacated that area tipped me off to a guy that was baiting for like 18 years. And he was this really wealthy farmer from San Jose, a multimillionaire that would bring Culpepers from his agricultural operation, these bell peppers. And Andy, I had no idea that bell peppers, they're like candy, man. They're like Tootsie Rolls to frickin' deer, yeah.
See, if you would have let me guess 10 things that deer wanted, I wouldn't have said bell peppers.
No, you'd think roses, succulents, berries, well, whatever. Corn. Yeah, something, Midwest.
Yeah.
So this guy was bringing up literally tons and tons of Culpepers. He'd been doing it for 18 years and never been caught. So as crazy as this sounds on this story, this guy would come up, he'd put out scouts to look on the roads. They'd glass for wardens or any type of law enforcement because they know they've been watched periodically, but they've never been caught. And then they'd get in the gate, they'd go through their gate, they'd dump in 5 different places, and they'd leave. And I just watch. I mean, this was like, Dr. Doolittle's game farm, man. All these
start to see the heads pick up.
Yeah, it was like a whitetail farm from the Midwest just coming in and going in. And they were so conditioned to this bait being there artificially, they would start to migrate, no exaggeration, they would start to migrate during the archery July A-zone season before the bait was even on the ground. They'd come up from like Alum Rock Park and start moving up here, brother, and then they'd lay up. So I made it a mission, we're going to get this guy. If I have to sit up here every night, every weekend, camping out in the dirt, we're going to get it. And we got him on the last Sunday of season, so it was a 6-week operation. And we didn't have specialized ATVs then. We didn't have all the camouflage, we didn't have all the night vision and good spotting scopes. So we were ad hocing it. We were doing it out of pocket, but learning a lot in the process. And that we made that case, which made a lot of doubters in my command staff like, you haven't written one deer ticket or fishing ticket. What are you doing? Just hiding on a hill for 6 weeks? You're welcome back. You're home. I heard good things from what you did in SoCal, but my lieutenant's pulling his hair out going crazy. But then we made the case, and I gave him a 3-inch pile of surveillance notes when we did the prosecution and put the report together, and he was convicted, and it stopped it. And then it took about a year, and then all these deer were back. And so to put the time into making a case like that really made a difference from the standpoint of species and conservation, and also as a challenge. I love going after a hardcore that thinks he has the game warden's number, and busting the guy that that's a long time.
That's extreme repetitive behavior.
Uh-huh.
What I'm assuming you encountered poachers sporadically. Did you have any main motivations behind them just deviating from the law? They just didn't care, or what was the main motivation you found between poachers?
It was kind of ingrained. It was almost like a tradition. It was one of these things where they felt they had a right. It wasn't a privilege. Socialized down from generation to generation.
I was going to say that's some bad gouge getting passed down from
it
father
is.
to son.
It is, and it's interesting because at one time I would see an 18-year-old son of like a Bay Area shrimp fisherman that was, we'd always worked for violating, the marine stuff with shrimp violations or commercial fisheries.
Again, I completely forgot you guys.
Yeah, and we do that too. Yeah, we're doing shrimp and we're doing abalone and
whitetail and shrimp. It's a classic pairing. Surf and turf.
Surf and turf. Exactly. But we would see these youngsters under these, mentors baiting doves, shooting doves on an overlimit, and all this other stuff on September 1st. And we'd find, they'd be doing deer baiting after dove season or during. And it was just ingrained because that's the way they were raised. And so those were the guys we would bust. But again, it's one of those things where my whole thing in my career was treat everybody with respect, even if you catch them red-handed. And maybe you're going to turn somebody around if you do this the right way. And I actually had a couple of guys through my career, I'm going to say probably, 5 or 10. Most hardcore poachers don't really turn the other cheek. They just got to get busted, and we got to revoke their stuff and try to get them out of circulation. But some guys, they were treated fairly. They weren't treated with the beat down as long as they didn't get violent. And I didn't have to get violent. Everything was going to go okay. They took their ticket. We seized a lot of their equipment. Probably got their license revoked for many years because they had multiple egregious, wildlife violations. And then they would call me out of the blue, like a year later and say, you were really cool how you handled that. And your guys are really cool. I mean, I was never treated that well by other law enforcement or, the game warden, before, kind of, gave me the beat down. There was, some judgment. And we're emotional about what we protect because we love wildlife. We're not just doing a job. So sometimes we get a little heated. But by going in with that approach, they would call me later on as like an informant and go, you know what? I want to help you out. I'm not going to ever do this again. I know a lot of, this and that. And I was making some great cases, these guys. So it's kind of the, poacher to preacher type mentality.
That's very interesting.
And
actually.
It's cool when that happens, because imagine the wealth of negative knowledge these guys know when they're trying to play cat and mouse with us for generations. And now all of a sudden they're like, you know what?
You're getting an inside look at their tactic playbook.
Oh, man. And we made some crazy cases. I mean, it's funny. I haven't thought about this case. It's so funny. You asked a perfect question. I hadn't thought about this case, man, until right now for about 10 years. But I remember a guy. And it was, you remember Highway 9 toll gate?
Yes.
Going up over Highway 17
yes.
between Santa Cruz and where I was at, where you grew up. There was Toll Gate Road. It went up to a really wealthy community. I mean, multi-million-dollar mansions, rose bushes, high landscaping, 5-acre parcels. And I actually got a tip from a guy that I had treated well and busted. And he goes, I got to let you know something. There's a guy up there, and he's got this customized rifle. It was like a 32-20 caliber black, basically a lead head that he had put squib loads in, so it was subsonic, so it was super quiet.
Oh wow!
And he had a
So he's already deep right there.
Oh, he's way deep.
Yeah,
way deep. And he's telling me he didn't know the particulars, but he said it's some really trick rifle that's really quiet. But he's driving up like when everyone's getting home, mom's getting home with the kids, people are coming in, and he's driving right in under these, under the umbrella, people getting home. And within a couple hours, and he's shooting a buck quietly, like just stopping like he belongs there at a mailbox, pops a buck, leaves the area, comes back in the middle of the night and harvests it, and never gets caught, because these people are just, everyone's assuming he's part of the, the community. And so I started working this, and it took several weeks, and it was weeknight stuff. It was crazy. It was early. Usually when you talk spotlighters, you're in the sticks, in the mountains, and it's 2, 3, 4 in the morning. 5 o'clock, it's just getting dark, and
this guy's just roan bagging it.
And he's rolling, and he's in his wife's new Acura, and in the back, he had this uncased, this 32 caliber lever gun with these special loads. He had some guy hand load for him. He wasn't a hand loader himself, so they were subsonic. And then he had a scout scope. When those scout scopes were brand new, they were just coming out, the forward eye relief way forward, like the Jeff Cooper scout rifle. And sure enough, this weapon, it was a $5,000 weapon, the way it was customized and set up. And I actually caught him spotlighting under a judge's house in the judge's landscaping of the court that we prosecuted in there in Santa Clara County. And when I caught him red-handed, he went, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here. How do you know?" I'm, just checking the area. Yep. And it was crazy, man. That was one of those guns that went back to our academy in the exotic weapons class that we could tell a heck of a story about. I mean, talk about a customized poacher rig. But those type of cases are the ones that just stand out, and you go, wow, it can happen anywhere, anywhere. So,
I mean,
it is happening.
That might actually be the best place to do it, right underneath somebody's nose.
Yeah.
You got a nice looking car, you're just road banging with the
sun's
up, just like, hey, just drop my kids off.
Got a big buck. I'll come back and get them tonight.
I tell you what, the modification, the hand loading to a subsonic round, to me, as soon as you said that, I was like, ooh. This guy's taking it serious.
Yeah. That sounds like operational stuff, man.
I can see guys just grabbing their, whatever gun, their, truck gun, and doing that type of stuff, just shooting off the road. But if somebody goes that deep, I mean, that's a lot of investment in time, energy, and effort.
It really is. And intention. I mean, it shows you about the mindset. And I mean, this guy knew, and he was completely friendly. He was completely nonviolent,
because he knew he was completely screwed.
He was completely hosed, And I did. And what was so embarrassing was, I mean, I light him up, and I had a Chevy Blazer at the time, like an '87 Blazer, the old school blue. We didn't have any green trucks yet, and I remember lighting him up with the red and blues and the spotlight and everything. And I'm in this neighborhood, and people's lights are coming on, and security systems are going on. He's just like, oh my gosh, the embarrassment, But
can we do this somewhere else?
Can we do this somewhere else? Can you take me down to toll gate? And no. Everyone's going to see.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to see.
That's awesome.
Your limelight, your 15 minutes, man. You just had your 15 minutes.
It's crazy those happened right in between where you and I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did it change for you? Did it go from that type of enforcement, or I would say the traditional game warden enforcement, to, I'll actually just let you describe what it became or how that pipeline started for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting chain of events, because I think if I hadn't been at the right place at the right time and didn't have a good relationship with the more tactical oriented, like SWAT teams, with the sheriff's office, or with San Jose PD, they have a merge team, which is a full-time, really good SWAT team, dedicated. The military element of like Moffett Field was there, and the counter drug group that, when they're not saving our, our operators, and our servicemen like yourself. from the 129th, from the Air Force, the Air Rescue Squadron, and the PAVHawk teams. They're doing counter-drug work right all over the state of California and other parts of the country out of Moffett. I didn't know any of that, but I got to know that early on before I ever got exposed to the first cartel cannabis grow with the SWAT guys I was working with, or the special operations guys. So myself and my partner Mark, we had an affinity. We were both shooters. We liked tactics, so we wanted to step up the game, not only as game wardens, but just make ourselves better as law enforcement, whatever we're going to do, spec ops or not. So we were going to SWAT schools that the agencies were bringing us into, operator schools, various weapon systems, sniper schools, building our own rifles, and we were enjoying it. And we were
Was your department supportive of that?
They were, without supporting it financially or the time.
So you were out of pocket on your own?
It was out of pocket, completely out of pocket on our own. And, game wardens aren't the highest paid cops. So, our families were like, what are you doing? What are you building?
Well, and the reason I asked that is because, again, if you would have asked me what the traditional roles and responsibility of a game warden is, I likely wouldn't say sniper. I wouldn't say a tactical team. It's just not what I thought of.
Yeah. And even then, that was so non-traditional and non-conforming. It didn't make sense to the traditional-minded supervisor or our department with the mindset, and then to people on the outside. But what was happening as a result of being in the Bay Area and being around really good teams is they became our support. Like when we were on a really crazy call with a felon or a parolee that we catch fishing at night, San Jose PD or the sheriff's office, they're going to be there faster than my next game warden that might be 3 hours away or even at home. So we started to become partners, and they started to see us as viable equals when it came to tactical knowledge and officer safety, and they liked it. And that was the first time that was really starting to happen. I mean, it started to happen in other parts of the state with other officers too. And I think we knew, or at least I had the foresight to know, that with the way public safety issues were developing, and this was this was right before 9/11.
I was just going to ask that.
It was literally like 2000 that we started immersing in all these schools. And then when 9/11 hit, and we had just gone to sniper schools with a bunch of guys, military and law enforcement. Those military guys were they were Reserve SEALs. There were, different guys from Delta. There were guys from the Air Force, and they're deployed. And, everything changed.
Where'd you go through sniper school at?
Santa Clara County Sheriff's Range.
Cool.
Yeah, they had a really good one at the time. It was the first rural school that went, out to 300 yards, which no one was doing in law. It was 100, maybe 2.
Yeah, I think the average law enforcement sniper shot is around 77 yards.
77 yards, yep.
Which in a city makes sense because you can see about 77 yards.
Yeah. And then the cool thing was what the sheriffs were doing in their school is they're saying, hey, we're a rural team. We might get deployed on this, crazy woodland area where we might have to do overwatch or shoot far. And I like that school. And I talk about them in both books, and I really get into them in book 2. In the new book, Hidden War, John Spagnola was a sergeant, and he was running Sierra Team at the time, which is the Santa Clara County Sheriff's sniper team within their SWAT unit. And I met John in my first sniper school in 2000 when he and I were going together. He was a pup deputy who was sanctioned, he was basically, taken under the arm to do an apprenticeship to go to sniper school and maybe become a sniper within their unit. It was really tough to get into. They had about five guys on gun. So I met John, Mark and I met him at that school, and we were all shooting well, having a great time, and we just really clicked. And what I liked about him is he was always looking to improve everything, and he was just OCD and super organized, and I shared a lot of those same, kind of quirks, if you will. I had learned to hand load early on as a teenager, so I was into precision ammunition, getting as much accuracy out of the gun, the cartridge, and trying to do my part as a shooter.
You're all in.
All in.
Yeah.
I smelled the ether, I was done.
Yep.
And knowing that when all that was coming together, I said, we may not need a sniper unit now. We may not even need a SWAT type game warden unit now. But given the direction the world's going, and Al-Qaeda training camps are being found like in the deserts out in Imperial and San Diego County, and our patrol game wardens are running across some of those same guys that were responsible for 9/11, we find out.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that till many years later, but I'm like, we're going to need to be involved. We're going to need to have these skill sets, if nothing else, to integrate. So that was the building blocks to at least get us in the right mindset. And not everybody was doing it, but some of the game wardens that I was close to were the guys that liked it. They had an affinity for tactics and weapon stuff. So we dove in. And then when I found the first cartel grow in 2004, which is the first chapter of my first book, War in the Woods, that blew my mind. I went, okay, man, this is not the traditional game. We're we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And just a backstory on that, fill you in on just how that kind of started is my buddy who was doing a biological study on steelhead trout and red-legged frog and all these endangered species right in a little piece of property that was an old hunting ranch at Attico Park called Pallasoo Ridge. He had been doing a study in there for, I think it was about year 2 of about a 5-year study for his master's thesis. And he called me in late April. I grew up with this guy, hunting, fishing, hanging out, family friend forever, super cool guy. And he goes, John, this is crazy, man. It's April. River flow should be great. It's rain runoff. We're still in our spring. And I got two creeks I study, and one's flowing like 100 miles an hour, and steelhead, have come up from the bay and they've spawned, and we got our fry in there and they're doing good and all the other animals are fine. But the left channel is completely dry and everything's dead. Fish fry are dead. They're drying out. Frogs are dead. There's a bunch of debris and trash like in the creek, a bunch of plastic like black plastic what's that?
Yeah, nonsensical for the area.
Andy, it made no sense. No sense at all. I'd never seen anything like it. But the first thing I think of when a creek's dry when it shouldn't be is I go into the old school mentality of the traditional stuff. This is a water diversion from a farmer or some landowner up top that's diverting it for cattle, or he's diverting it for his own agriculture, and there's a water issue, and it's a public waterway, so we got to go check it out. So I throw him in the truck. We go up the beautiful, beautiful canyon. We get to the top, we're right in the border of Attico Park, and I have, my backpack. I have general patrol supplies. I got my AR. He's an unarmed civilian, savvy, but, not armed, obviously. And we dive into the canyon, and there's no cell coverage. There's no radio coverage. We're just like, we're deep. And we get into this real pristine, it's like a mini Grand Canyon. Gorgeous. I'd never seen it. Where it's a real thin little tributary that's kind of the headwaters of everything that gets to Coyote Creek. And if, from the Bay Area, that Coyote Creek goes all the way to the South Bay.
Yep.
And it's our only viable left steelhead spawning migration channel to come all the way from the bay, let those fish lay their eggs so we get some steelhead and go back. And we dive down, and sure enough, we see that, the whole creek is dammed up. There's a water hose in it, and the water hose is kind of going down a dry channel and going off in the woods somewhere. So, we go in and sneak in there, and I'm waiting to find that traditional diversion. It's going to be somebody doing something for agriculture. And then I start to see marijuana plants, and they're, maybe 2.5, 3 feet tall, maybe 2 feet tall. It was early.
Yeah, early on.
I'm going on, running, cruising down, and I'm seeing, just the water's a weird color. Like there's something in it, and we had no idea about these EPA banned toxic, poisons that these guys import across the border at the time, but they were using them. This was 2004. And we keep going down further and further down, and I see a camp in the creek, and I see just a bunch of trash, and the banks all the vegetation's removed, trees are cut down, and here's just, acres and acres and acres of marijuana. And then I see 2 growers, and these guys are, Hispanic, and they're dressed in camo, and they have heavy weapons, and they got big knives on them, and they got machetes, and they're going through tending their water lines, but they did it in such a way that really kind of freaked me out. They had situational awareness, they knew they didn't belong there, but they had tactical training, because they would stop, and one guy would look around and scan, and check everything out, look at his surroundings, and then they would stop, occasionally look at their 6 o'clock. They'd be really quiet as they moved. They were silent, and I went, wow, this is not your typical poacher. What are these guys doing? Where are they from? And, my mind's spinning, and now I'm thinking, we can't contact them. That's not going to be a good day. I have an unarmed civilian with me, and I got one AR, and I got a red dot on the lead guy that's, 30 yards in closing down this creek, and we're hiding in a creek cut bank. And I'm thinking this could be a real bad day, because we walked into something we had no idea or were prepared for because of the mindset we were locked into. And fortunately, they got to about 15 yards. They made a hard left. We stayed hidden. I trained on the lead guy with the weapon, just holding, hoping it didn't get crazy. And he worked his way up the hill, and they doubled back. And then we did we basically backtracked our steps, climbed the big hill, got out. My mind was racing. I'm like, holy crap, what is this? I got to call the right people. And then it went from there.
It just accelerated.
It ramped up quick. Yeah, because where I had never worked with narcotics teams and some of these HIDTA teams that were, set for doing drug cases, and at the time, that side of cannabis was considered, in a narcotics world. I started working with agencies I'd never worked with. That's when I met some of the Santa Clara County Sheriff's marijuana enforcement team guys that would later become the closest brothers I could ever ask for from another agency that really helped legitimize us in what would later lead to our own team. But we worked with a lot of agencies on that raid, and obviously we were the guides, the bird dogs, the wildlife experts to get them into position. Mm-hmm. But we weren't looked at for any tactical advisement. We weren't looked at for arrest, planning or operational setup or any of that. And when we executed that raid with them, it was really cool to be part of that mission, but we learned a lot from that mission, and we learned what we wanted to do different if we were going to stay in the game. Where we could have caught guys on that raid, we didn't, because it was don't chase them, don't get hurt. We'll announce early, if they give up, great. If not, don't chase them. And I thought, they're doing a lot of damage to my wildlife, man. Yeah. I want to chase them. I want to get some cuffs on these guys, get them in the dirt, that type of thing. Yep. And then when we eradicated all those plants and cut them all down, we had no idea we were like handling poisons and all this stuff on them, because it was kind of...
Talk a little bit about the poisons, if you would, because you went in pretty good depth on Joe's podcast. It was unbelievable the damage that stuff was doing.
Yeah, what these guys do is, we got to remember, and I want to talk about California being a regulated state now with cannabis, and Montana where we're at now as well. And we just want to, want your listeners to know that this is apples and oranges. This is the side of cannabis that will never be legal. It's trespass. It's on public lands or private ranches. It's never supposed to be on. It's done with EPA banned toxic poisons called carbofuran, furdan, metaphos. There's all these different trade names. Bottom line is, this stuff was banned about 20 years ago by the EPA from being used in America on agricultural products. And it's also a felony to even possess it in America and use it anywhere.
Wow.
Because it's so toxic. The active ingredient is basically a nerve agent that the Nazis developed in World War II. And this stuff is so concentrated and so toxic that just 2 tablespoons put in a creek, like the creek that was diverted, you could kill 2 to 5 miles of every living aquatic, every fish, every animal that drinks from the creek, no exaggeration, from just that limited amount of dose.
Sounds delightful.
Oh, it's lovely. Great stuff.
Jesus.
And the funny part about it is when you mix it up with water and you shake it up, it looks like a pink energy drink. You think you're drinking a workout drink, or, looks like Pepto-Bismol or something. And so this stuff looks really sedate on these trails in the woods that anybody could hike next to and find in like a cache, a bag that's set to go to a grow site. We had no idea what this stuff was, or the how toxic it was and how nasty it was at the time. But it was actually in that grow site way back in 2004. And when we start talking about those future missions and what happened, especially the last 5-6 years when we built our specialized unit and how we dealt with that stuff, it got pretty crazy.
Well, I mean, I'd love to hear you explain how you got to that point with your own unit and what it eventually became.
Sure. Well, getting back to that one mission in 2004, one of the things we saw besides different tactics where we felt we could have apprehended these guys to maybe put a little deterrence in them and get them out of circulation. I didn't know at the time that the way the cartel cells work is if these guys get away, they're just kind of laughing at us like, these guys, cops are going to come in, they're going to make a lot of noise, we have our escape trails. It's going to suck to lose a 10 to 20 to $30 million cash cow in one grow, but I'm just going to move over and I'm going to be put in another grow.
Yeah.
Because the guy I work for, the people right above him, he's probably responsible for 50. Throughout a good portion of California, maybe some other states. So not catching them really didn't sit well with us, and it didn't sit well with Santa Clara County sheriffs either. Lori Smith, the sheriff, who's still the sheriff in Santa Clara County, and Nancy Foley, our chief, were both hand in hand collaterally in what their vision was, and they agreed, we need to catch these guys. And we'll give the tactical training we need to. We know it's going to get dangerous. We'll take that hit. If the guys want to do it, we're going to go after them. But the thing that really irritated us was after we eradicated all those plants, it was 7,000 plant grow that day, PaveHawk came in to help us because we needed air support unplanned. It was much bigger than we thought. That was my first exposure to the military teams and hoisting in and out and bringing all that stuff in. That was cool. Started a good relationship with our military, brother and sisterhood there. But after all the plants were cut, we lifted all that stuff out, and I talked to the team leader, and I'm like, well, why aren't we taking the hose out?
The job's not quite done yet.
Why aren't we getting the creek back? Look at all that propane and human excrement where they've been crapping in the creek for like 4 months. I mean, this is a steelhead channel. These fish are threatened and endangered, federally listed. They're like $20,000 value at least per fish. We're down to a couple thousand a year. This is the hub, the source. Let's clean it up. And like, no, we don't do that, man. It's like we're not going to clean up garbage. We're not paid. We're not funded. And at the time, Andy, all the funding was based on plant count from the DEA, and we would get the DCEP grant every year under the drug czar right under the president. And I'm like, this isn't adding up, man. And then my chief, Nancy, was really supportive. She said, you know what, if we're going to be involved, I'm going to support it, but we need to get these other agencies helping us clean up. And somehow, some way, we need to get to the drug czar. We need to get to the national level of policymaking with DEA to show that environmental reclamation and cleanup is as valuable, if not more so, than just cutting plants. And we need to get funding to agencies based on that. And that was a non-traditional way to go. And if you're not a conservation law enforcement agency, you're not thinking, yeah, I've just spent 20 hours on a crazy raid, a workup of how a daily op goes.
Yeah.
And, when we're running hot, we're running 5, 6, 7 of these a week. You're pretty wrecked and pretty smoked at the end of a 100-degree day, and the insertion, exsertion, the after exfil, after canine deployments, and then after chopping all that garbage and getting it out. Nobody wants to sit around and clean up a grow site.
Yeah, it's the last thing on your mind at that point.
Yeah, it's ugly work, but we all felt like we were doing some good stuff, or let's bring in a secondary team. And it took about 10 years. And then in that 10-year period,
that sounds about bureaucratically correct.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, I mean, like you feel like
realistically,
you're just spitting in the wind, man.
Yeah.
But I just kept grinding. And other things that had happened that really got us the attention we needed and it was a horrible event, but some positive things came out of it, was a second big mission with Santa Clara County that the first book goes into, that you probably heard me talk a little bit with Joe about, was when we got in our first gunfight. Mm-hmm. And it was just above Los Gatos, that Sierra Azul open space
Which
peninsula.
Is insane to me. When you say Los Gatos and gunfight, I'm just like, what are you...
Yeah.
You're out of your mind.
Affluent Los Gatos, what cartel gunfights with game wardens and sheriffs, what's going on. But that day, when we went into that grow site, I mean, it was about a mile hike straight up. It wasn't real far, but it was real brushy, real arduous. But where we were sitting, no joke, you could look down and see eBay, Facebook, Google, Cisco. You could see all that area you and I saw growing up coming over that hill, right? And so we had better cell coverage than we had radio coverage. That tells you the line of sight. And what we went into was another 10, 11,000 plant grow, part of a bigger complex that was like 30,000, unchecked. Cartel run. They never had any interaction with law enforcement. They were just in there like cells all over a mountainside that went about 2 or 3 miles. And they were in the middle of harvest time, so they had their more aggressive gunmen set up with SKSs and AK derivatives and sawed-off 12 gauges and the whole nine. And they got one of the bad guys got one shot off, and unfortunately that shot went through my young partner's legs, through his right thigh, exited his inner right thigh, and was tumbling like a 7.62 39 steel core supposed to do, and it just tumbled through his left leg. So he's bleeding out of 4 holes. And we're 3 game wardens, 3 sheriff's deputies, 1 unarmed mid-peninsula ranger, doing what we can do with limited resources, because up to that point, no one had ever been hurt in these grows. No law enforcement had been shot at.
Yeah.
Very seldomly did they even see a bad guy, much less catch anybody. And they never found guns. And now these guys just, were ready and armed to unleash hell on us, but they only got 1 shot off before the cacophony of gunfire between me and my partners with their ARs got some bad guys down that were going to wreak more havoc. But my partner took a pretty near fatal hit.
What were your guys' ROEs in those situations?
What's that?
What were the ROEs you guys were operating under?
Yeah, that's a good question that comes up. And rules of engagement it's standard deadly force protocol for us in law enforcement. Same thing with the sheriffs. If we see a deadly force threat that can, lay harm to ourselves or our partners, then we can engage. But they have to pull a gun. They have to do something to execute deadly force. We can't just see them, say, with a weapon, in a holster or anything like that. So it's a fine line. Obviously, it's a super fine line.
It sounds similar. Our ROEs, obviously, they're based in one. You always have the inherent right to self-defense.
Right.
And that includes the people that you're with. It doesn't have to be a direct threat to you. But for us, one of 2 criteria largely had to be met. It was hostile act or hostile intent.
Right.
Hostile act, obviously, pulling a gun and pointing it at me. Perhaps we might have had a little bit more leeway in the intent because we could make an assumption as to the individual's activity. A great example would be military age male for no other reason than to get the tactical advantage is assuming a high ground position.
Right.
If articulated correctly, you're in the good zone to engage that. And I've always felt, and I've never had no law enforcement background whatsoever, but I always felt that we had probably a little bit more room to make decisions in that environment. Because I would imagine for you guys, given especially the litigious nature of the work, would almost be slightly reactive in nature.
It is, unfortunately, and that's a fine line. And more people have said, if we could have rules of engagement a little closer to what you just described, because you know that profile.
Yep.
And after you've had enough missions, as you well know, and I'm preaching to the choir on this one, is the more grows we would go into and the more armed gunmen we would see and growers during harvest time, we're like, okay, well, we had one gunfight in here. My partner was almost killed on this one. Fortunately, he wasn't. And then we started to ramp up the tactics, the medical support, the administrative support. I mean, on that particular mission, we waited 3 hours for an air rescue from a bird that would actually come into a hot zone and lower a hoist and lower a medic and basket him out.
That's a long time when you
it was a long ass
hydraulic
time.
fluid coming out.
Oh yeah, and he's bleeding out everything. Tough kid.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just. We had a baiting case of all things we were going to do the very next weekend, and all he's thinking is like, "Oh, I hope I'm okay to do the baiting case." I'm like,
take it easy.
Take it easy, breathe. Let's just get you off this damn hill and
You're
do
gonna
it.
get some calm time. Just go ahead and enjoy that.
Yeah. We'll get the baiting case later. So
did you guys throw some tourniquets on his legs?
We did, but we had Israelis.
Yep.
We had some very, just basically webbing for tourniquets. We didn't have cat tourniquets yet.
I know. It was early.
This was early.
Yeah.
I mean, this was '05 when you guys, fighting the war on terror overseas, were just starting to get all your trauma medicine.
TCCC stuff was just ramping up.
It was just ramping up. Quick clots, C-locks, all anticoagulant. And so this incident for us, because we had so many reserves and we were working with Moffett, they're like, you know what, you guys are kind of fighting a little domestic eco-terrorist war right here, and you're way ill-equipped. And so the first thing we did after that whole incident went down is, and again, Nancy was our chief, I mentioned her before, and a shout out because she said, okay, we took a lot of heat of why game wardens run a drug case. What the heck are they doing up there? Why did that kid get shot? And I'm telling everybody, why aren't game wardens on a case like that? It's an environmental train wreck. It's the biggest anti-environmental poaching wildlife loss we're seeing, at least that I had ever seen, and I've been on almost 15, 16, 17 years. So she kept us in the game, but she took some heat, because again, traditional, what does a game warden do? But in addition to getting the tactics and having more support and more bodies and more trained operators to do it the right, safe way, I said, we need medical training better. We need better medical equipment. And we started to get to do that. And it was largely from what you guys were doing overseas. We had a lot of those Delta level medics coming back to Moffett and going, hey, I just did this with the teams. We changed this technique. We're using this new thing. And so, it got to where you're carrying a dirty tourniquet, a secondary tourniquet. Now we run the same stuff, our SEAL brothers and other special ops brothers and sisters do.
And you look at the people who
can
survive the injuries overseas. I mean, people now are surviving things that would be fatal
crazy.
In warfare generations before.
Yeah.
I bet one of the main reasons that the administration or the bureaucracy will push back against, I don't want to say loosening the ROEs, but changing them, is there's the reality that you're going to be wrong sometimes.
Right.
Because you have to make assumptions. And
Absolutely.
again, in an environment where body cameras seem to be mandatory, it's very difficult to empower your people to make those decisions if you know that the guillotine is going to fall on your head.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to justify it. So I can understand that, but I think you guys would probably be a little bit more effective and safer if you were given just a touch more leash there.
We definitely would. We definitely would. You hit it on the head there. It's one of those things that was the first of 6 gunfights we were involved in right before I retired. My last one being 2017, before I retired last year at the end of 2018. And one thing we learned through the process, and none of us got hurt, fortunately, after that first one in 05. But what we learned moving on and on and on was the mindset, the motivation, the overt movements, like you said, military age male making that move. You pretty much know what's going on here, so you can make that leeway. We still have to stay within that deadly force threat being immediate, but we can prepare better going in to know, hey, that bulge is probably a weapon, get the canine ready, and the second that gun comes out, we're not going to wait.
Yeah.
Guys had enough experience at that point that there wasn't any hesitation. So
it's a lot of pattern recognition over the years.
It's a lot.
It really is.
And every time we go through another critical incident, just the better you get at making that quick assessment and having your young guys, ramped up. And something that was really, really cool is all of these violent encounters that were leading in, basically leading to gunplay, we didn't have canines yet. So 05, 06, and then we had our second shootout in 07, and this one was in Saratoga, right below Mountain Winery, not far from there.
This is ridiculous.
Same type of, and guys running a 30-30 carbine and a Glock and a shotgun, just crazy stuff. But
where are they sourcing those weapons from?
From us. They're all stolen. And what people don't realize is they're thinking, well, is it a bias, against Latin growers? Is it really cartel? I've heard so many different criticisms and critiques over the years, and I even get that, when after Joe's, after with Stephen Ranell, after I did that show and telling this story in different forms and different examples, people just can't fathom that that's really what's going on. But I hate to be the spoiler here, guys, but it's not rosy in our woods, some of the places, and these same cartel groups we know aren't only growing this tainted cannabis and selling it all over America on the black market to unsuspecting growers. They're ingesting these poisons. These same groups they're running guns to fight the wars in Mexico because they don't have infrastructure to make weapons down there, good ones. So all the stolen guns we see throughout the entire nation, a lot of it is from just that effort from these cartel groups, because they need to put they need to put guns in their growers' hands, their defenders, their gunmen during harvest. All of that. So they're all coming from mostly stolen sources within
Are you guys
America.
able to track those back, assuming that there's still a serial number on it?
Some of them. Most of the time, honestly, Andy, the serial number's gone.
They
file it off. And we find
sense.
some nice, as an example, and you being a gun guy too, when I see a Colt Series 70 Gold Cup that's just tricked out for something my dad, I inherited from dad, and that's just gold in the hand, we found one of those in a cartel grow and tried to track it back, and the serial number was ground off, but we did some more deeper testing and found it, and it was like stolen out of Washington, out of some nice home from a veteran.
Yeah.
A lot of Glock pistols, a lot of the duty guns we carry, 40s, 9s, different ones, they're all stolen. The SKSs, the AKs, the ones we've seized from the guys we have been engaged or have had to engage, and we actually recovered the weapon, 9 times out of 10 stolen or no record, which means they're stolen. It just hasn't been reported, or the serial number isn't identifiable. So there's that going on. And then we got to look at the fact that fentanyl, the new synthetic heroin, and methamphetamine and human trafficking, all one big group.
Yeah.
Just doing different crimes. It's just the summer season is, okay, this is cannabis time because we're going to make a lot of money in country. We're not going to have to deal with the border interdiction of losing some of it. So we'll produce down there, do panga boats, still smuggle it across the border, taking it, calculated loss, but we're going to make hundreds of millions.
Yeah. They'll lose one to get 99 through.
Yeah.
I talked to my law enforcement buddies up here, and I can't speak for them, obviously, but when I do talk with them about, because I'm curious, I have kids. Like, what are the major issues you guys are dealing with?
That's the thing, yeah, for sure.
Oftentimes they'll say stolen guns, that crime, because that becomes the cash product, because what they're dealing with a lot of the times is methamphetamines.
Yes.
And what they're doing is they'll take the weapons across the borders. There's 3. They're saying that there's 3 basically cities that are hubs for here.
So
trade
true.
Weapon for drug.
Right.
Drug comes back. Drug becomes cash product for them.
Yep.
And the meth in here, we're 60 miles from the Canadian. Well, we're probably a little bit, maybe 80 now from where we are, but it's Mexican methamphetamine.
Yeah.
And we're 80 miles from the Canadian border.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see how that is all connected.
It's all connected, and the scary part about it is, I've done a lot of obviously outreach on this in the Montana area, and so officers and public groups are concerned. Well, do we have this grow problem here in Montana? Once in a blue moon, you'll get a grow. Our growing season, our elevation.
I was going to say it's probably not set up for it environmentally.
Not set up for it environmentally exactly, but the methamphetamine production, the human trafficking, the fentanyl stuff, it's all going on here. It's in every state in the union. So, that poisoning element, the last thing we want to see is your kids, our kids, grandkids, anybody, affected by this stuff, but the demand is there. So these guys
Does it make it into the weed, the poisons that you're talking about? Does it actually, the finished product, there's still residue in there?
There is. And what happens is these guys spray it all over the flower, all over the bud, in the water right below the plant.
It kills everything, right? That's
kills
why
everything.
It's illegal, because it's too effective.
Oh, it's way too effective.
Yeah.
And check this out, brother. So this stuff is like a 12-ounce container is all like crystalline powder. And was originally made to be diluted in like 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of water, and then sprayed in sprayers on a plant, whatever ag plant, for consumption. The EPA determined even that was too toxic and cancerous and everything. So the way these growers do it is they have a backpack sprayer, like 3 to 5 gallons at the most.
One of the just the handheld pump.
The handheld pump ones, or the back, they pump it up and they're just out spraying, and they put a whole container of that stuff in there to 3 to 5 gallons of water. So imagine the concentration. And I've got pictures in there, even in the new book, where you've got a guy all camouflaged with a sprayer and he's smiling, and it's on these 10-foot plants. And then the next picture we find on this guy's cell phone after we capture him is he's holding up a golden eagle and smiling. Look what I just killed that came into my plant, a golden eagle. I mean, that's pretty rare. From Cali. That's like, they're more rare than bald eagles here in Montana. And obviously an animal you never want to kill like that. So, but the doses that are on the plants, the doses that these guys are getting exposed to, and then what we're getting exposed to, as officers and cleanup crews from whatever agency is of huge concern. Now, this stuff does dissipate. Once it gets on the plant, it goes on almost like a white sheen, like overspray from a white paint or bird droppings. That's what it kind of looks like. And then when it dries, it gets kind of clear. And as it dries more after 14 days, it's almost invisible. So they process everything in the grow, all their buds in 1 pound, vacuum sealed little digital scales. It gets put in the sea bags. And if they get it out of the woods and don't get interdicted by our efforts, it goes to distribution centers on the West Coast and just pipelines all the way through the nation. Potent THC, really relatively inexpensive compared to organic, licensed, inspected cannabis in these legitimate farms. And, kids and medical patients and recreationalists to the tune of 40 plus million people in the U.S. are ingesting this stuff all over the country and have no idea what they're ingesting.
And can they only compete with that because of the price point? I mean, you look at California, right, where it's like, hey, everything, go to town. And they still have a market for that there just based on the price point alone?
It's price point and because there's a black market in the rest of the country. So like in Iowa, that has no regulation, let's say, or maybe Nebraska or whatever middle America town, Eastern Seaboard, New York, Chicago, so much of this stuff gets there because there's no legitimate market for it. So obviously there's still other grows going on, say in California, that are being illegally, products being illegally moved to all those areas, and it's organic and it's clean and it's going to bring a higher market or a higher price. But it's still black market stuff because the black market is rampant in so many states. So just because of that demand, and there's such a big demand for weed everywhere, this stuff has no problem getting sold. And what's interesting is, and what we really dive into when we talk about the end of book number 2 with Hidden War is, okay, now that I'm at the end of a 6-year, 5-year plan before retirement of getting this team on board, building it the right way, working with all the right people, getting it in circulation to be as effective as we can to stop this product from getting anywhere out into the open market and get these guys out of circulation for obvious reasons. Has regulation helped? I mean, California, Prop 64, 2 years deep now. Has it affected this? I hoped it would have. I really did. I said, if you're going to regulate, let's just regulate right. And Joe and I talked a little bit about this. I'm sure you remember on the federal level, and there's all different debates on what's going to work. But what I can honestly say is the way we're regulating in like California and some other states, we're not breaking the back of this black market, either in the legitimate industry or definitely in the cartel black market, the dark side of it, unfortunately. And this stuff is in high demand.
What would break the back of it?
You really have to see something like regulation. It's such a uniform level, and the price, it's such an accessible level that this stuff doesn't even have a way of even getting in. And every state's doing something different. And it doesn't matter where you sit on for or against cannabis use, right or left. Take the politics out of it. Take the stance on cannabis out of it. Let's just look at this from a realist standpoint of keeping our public safe and then, preserving and protecting our waterways, wildlife, and wild lands. And we got to do something different. One of the things that frustrated me the most, and I talk about this in that chapter, is we knew regulation was going to happen in California. We saw it coming 5 years. We saw it coming before we built the team and started the pilot program in 2013.
Yeah. And
me and Nate Arnold, now deputy chief, but the captain that co-built this thing, and Mike Carrion, our chief, that blessed us to do this thing and try it in 2013 to see it would be effective. We knew this was coming because there was just such a demand in California. It's a weed state, Mediterranean climate, just like good wine.
Yeah.
We're it, man.
It's the reason they grow grapes up in the
Yeah, right?
Sonoma.
Yeah. And so we said, if you guys are going to regulate, regulate with legitimate industry, get those guys on track, make sure that stuff's organic, make sure it's documented, make sure it's taxed, whatever has to happen. And let's take some of that money and let's go after these cartels a little harder. Let's put more enforcement effort. Let's build up these teams. Let's get them more support, and let's get reclamation money so we can have every grow site we go into completely sanitized, waterways, restored, poisons picked up, hazmats removed, all the trash taken out. And let's definitely not make it easier for these guys. And so what we wanted to see, like enhanced penalties, like it was already a felony at the time to grow cannabis under the health and safety code in a trespass capacity, whether you were a cartel gunman or a white guy just growing weed in Co Park or up in Santa Cruz Mountains. And it actually got watered down to a misdemeanor. And then for a juvenile cartel grower, it got watered down to an infraction.
What's the reasoning behind doing that?
You know what? I don't know for sure, but the only thing I can ascertain is just to get Prop 64 passed. It almost was one of those things where if we start showing certain part of the cannabis laws as felonies and we keep that, then it's going to turn a little bit of people away. Well, maybe we shouldn't regulate if there's still a felony to growing outdoors. So maybe there's, a predisposition that it's bad.
So they were rounding the edges a little bit.
They were rounding the edges. And what was ironic is I had talked to legislative groups. I mean, one of the things about being the lieutenant of this new team that was cool was the outreach component. So besides doing missions and building the sniper unit and and the team and canines and doing missions all over the state all year long and whatever else our department needed us to do, 30% of what I did was go out and talk about it, talk to grower groups, talk to political groups, talk to Conservate Rocky Mountain Elk as an example.
Yep.
Anybody that would listen that might run across this stuff like you and I doing a do-it-yourself hunt here in Montana, we run across something. And I educated and had a very graphic PowerPoint, very passionate about it. And I talked to a ton of legislative groups that were, all part of the politics of getting this in play. And I said, guys, if it's going to happen, don't do it this way. Let's keep this bite on these trespass growers. And it went the opposite way, unfortunately. And I don't know where the politics went. I'm not part of that realm. But we were disappointed to see that. And then we had to do a backpedal where, okay, all these other agencies said, well, we're not going to go after cartel cannabis trespass grows. It's a misdemeanor. There's not a jury or a prosecutor that's going to take it because weed's legal now. And we're going to risk our asses with those guys for what? So as an example, our old county, Santa Cruz. That sheriff's department, out of Prop 64, said, nope, we're not doing it.
Really?
We won't even help you guys when Met comes to town or we find one. The Santa Cruz Mountains.
That's a very interesting approach to take.
It was really effective. Out of sight, out of mind. Maybe the problem went away.
Yeah,
so
I'm just going to look over here.
Yeah, hear no evil, head in the sand.
That's a long-term strategy for failure if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, but in all fairness to our our sheriff's guys over there, they were looking at the fact that the DAs and the judges were saying, yeah, we're not. Good luck.
Oh, they're not going to prosecute it anyway.
They're not going to prosecute it anyway. So I can see from an enforcement resource, why would you put that time in? What we looked at, though, after Prop 64, we kind of had, the secret weapon. The silver bullet was we had our environmental laws, which now made it a felony again. So if they poison water, used a banned poison, right, diverted a creek, killed a deer, all of that stuff, diverted a waterway, littered a waterway, now you got your felonies back. Now you got your heavy misdemeanors back. So DAs were starting to understand, and I would talk to the California District Attorneys Association. They're fed up. They're like, we want to keep going after trespass growers. How do we do this? No one has a way. The laws are weak. And I'd give them a template in these presentations and say, look, guys, if you find this crime, and I guarantee you'll find a water diversion, a stream alteration, and water pollution,
just for them to grow.
And everyone you do, right? And I said, if you find that, and we'll help you guys document that either ourselves or train other people to do it, we'll get this crime going. And that's what we were doing. We kept catching guys on the Met front. We kept giving them all of the template for the environmental codes, and that's how they get their felonies. And the last gunfight we got into before I retired was kind of a crazy one, and it was in Santa Cruz Mountains, Highland Way, real close to, Demonstration Forest, where I learned to mountain bike, right? I mean, and Soquel Creek runs right in that base. And without giving away the whole story, that was one that over the years, the last 3 years that I was operational with the guys, we called that Asshole Alley, because it was just one of those places that those guys were working with impunity. No one was enforcing it. So they were always pulling knives on our dogs. They were always pulling guns. They were always fighting us, if they weren't with guns. It was always a fisticuffs and a beat down. We were in it. So when we were having more and more of these missions and they were getting closer and closer to more gunfights happening, largely, and the only thing that kept it from happening, honestly, Andy, was great canines. At this time, canine
Gotta
Phoebe,
have the meat missile.
The meat missile, man, the fire and forget for biscuit, and now we had those, and so they were keeping us from having to engage, and they're actually keeping those guys alive too in the process. But that last case was another gunfight, and he was a deportable felon, and he was here illegally, and he was known, in other grow sites and all that kind of classification, and we were the only ones on that hill. And we didn't have help from the sheriff's agency over there. We had some Santa Clara guys that came over with their canine and helped us, but that was strictly a Fish and Wildlife run mission in one of the most pristine areas left in Santa Cruz County, and we were on our own to handle it.
It's crazy. Because
of the way the law was structured. So the end result is, if we're regulate right, And definitely, I think we can all agree, no matter where we sit on the cannabis spectrum, for or against, nobody wants to see these trespass growers that aren't even from here. They're not even supposed to be here. We're talking about, a huge environmental impact and public safety threat.
Yeah, it's almost a separate issue, it seems like.
It is. It absolutely is. And everyone's starting to see that, and it's kind of cool. And I'm very appreciative to talk to gentlemen like yourself and given your background and the mutual areas we've come from and the mutual jobs we've done to help spread the message, and being retired, even back on agency with the team, and tell their story of all the good work they're doing and what we're up against. No one wants to see it. So
would you guys find the same, I don't know what the term would be for them, not growers or the armed guards, would you have repeat offenders on grow sites that you would encounter over and over and over again?
We would.
It's like, hey, Bob, put the gun down.
It's
again.
crazy, man. We would, between our NorCal teams and SoCal teams and guys, kind of in the Silicon Valley, and, the one thing about the Met team is when we started running independent, the structure was super cool because it was done in such a way that, kind of like the SOCOM model, work directly for the top, be able to go anywhere without district boundaries. In this case, our world was the state of California. So we went everywhere, and we educated in the process. But more importantly, we could go where we had to go. We could integrate patrol, mainline guys when we needed to. We could jump in with other agencies. And so we would see more of get a bigger, clearer picture of who was doing the biggest activity on the cartel front. And there were some, heinous guys with murder raps. They were gunmen for, particular cells, narcotics trafficking, all kinds of assault charges. And we'd have a canine deployment, get this guy, maybe bit, in custody, doing his thing, get him out of circulation, gets deported. A week later, he's in another grow, and another team's canine gets him, or they come close to going to guns.
And you're not joking.
I'm not joking.
A week later.
No, it is. Yeah. It's a week, sometimes less.
So the faucet is almost impossible to turn off when it comes to that.
It's impossible to turn off. And something, you get the whole border control issue coming up. And one thing I talk about, again, in the new work is debriefing some of these upper level guys that we got on other crimes, and they're telling us very candidly, because they can take a little bit lesser hit on the penalty and the time they're going to do in prison is, why do we keep seeing your guys like coming through an open door? I mean, what's going on, with the border, and how much, real stoppage is there? Is there a stopgap? And they just laugh and they go, no, man. they call it like a speed bump on I-5 between what they call.
Yeah, but they got awesome shocks.
They got awesome shocks, man. They Raptor it, or they F-150 soup it, with big Bilsteins and big Fox. But man, the crazy part is they look at it literally as a bump in the road, and because it's $4,000 to $7,000 for these guys to get their tier 1 grower or gunman or methamphetamine producer, that's a drop in the bucket for what these guys are going to make money wise. They just keep shipping across. And so, the last thing we learned, especially toward the middle of team development and getting to know how these cells operate, they're just like, we don't really think of California as anything but Mexico North. We don't agree that it was ever, divided. We didn't lose anything. We just have that speed bump you guys call the border, and we get across it, and we, have everything set up in geographical areas, and the rest of the country the same way, and we work it like a business model, and they're very, there's some structure to it, man, and they do it efficiently. And
is there a solution to that?
We just need to tackle it harder, and I think on this particular, if you just take the tainted cannabis issue, the trespass growth thing that we specialize in, you think of the first book coming out in 2010. You think of our agency doing the first Game Warden reality show, Wild Justice, that a lot of us on the team were featured on for like 3 seasons. The cool thing about doing that, as much as it can be arduous with film crews and security reasons, and you gotta weigh the outreach benefit versus the security benefit, but at least that put the world attention on what game wardens really do. So we got the recruitment. We had thousands of applicants again. We got special forces guys like yourself that love the outdoors and hunt going, I didn't know they had a spec ops team.
I've been looking for this my whole life.
I'm in my 30s. I did 8 years on the teams. I was in team 1 or whatever. And
what do I do now? Oh, that's what I do now.
That's what I do now. And so we got great guys coming over, and becoming game wardens in California and other states. So that whole thing was really cool, and it actually exposed some of those cases we showed on TV were these raids with those guys I mentioned right after 9/11, and everyone was shocked by it. And then we did, besides that, we did Patriot Profiles, that Life of Duty NRA TV series that Rick Stewart produces, and he did a lot of stuff with Team 6 and Great stuff with SEAL teams. He found out about my first book through Wayne LaPierre from the NRA, reached out and said, I have a documentary deal. If your department wants to do it, we'll just tell the story. And he did it on the reclamation issue in Silicon Valley. And that got some really good attention, as well as the TV series we were doing. But my point is, fast forward to now, 10 years later, the new book comes out, Retirement. I'm telling a new story that's even more in depth, trying to get more awareness on it. And we're at the NRA, annual meeting in April. And Ollie Norris, an endorser of the book, and he's saying, you guys got to be out here. This message is crazy. I hunt. I fought the war on drugs. That I'm not aware how crazy this is.
Yeah.
Right? And he's saying basically, get out here and talk to people. And here we are in Indianapolis, and everyone's picking up books, and they're like, man, Lieutenant, I had no idea this was going on. 10 years, Andy, we've been talking about it. It's been on TV. It's been in books.
Yeah.
It's been in,
I had no idea either.
Right.
I was focused elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I also had no idea that this type of activity, what you're talking about seems structured, it seems nuanced.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that their chemical sourcing is as easy for them as the human sourcing across the border.
It's
if
easy.
it's simple for them to get a person across, I'd imagine it's simple for them to get those chemicals across.
Yep. And that's the only stopgap is they just have to bring the chemicals because they can't get them here. But everything else is supplied. The guns,
the
the
way you
infrastructure.
described it, it seems like it'd probably be pretty easy to disguise it as something else or just put it inside of something else. How tactically savvy were they when you guys would go up against them?
It was a mix. The ones like in, say, Asshole Alley that I talk about over there, their savvy tactics were there for sure. And the same guys, I think, that were the ambushers on us back in 2005 when we did not have a team developed and we were undermanned, undergunned that day. The Santa Cruz County one in 2017 was still the Sierra Azul open space authority property, but it was just on the Santa Cruz side.
Yep.
So when we went into that, we started to see how aggressive they were and how camouflage and field craft, booby traps, things like punji pits,
Which is old school.
It's old school.
But effective.
But effective, right. And you see all of this kind of stuff developing, and then when I see where their camps are set up, in very shaded, very fortified, where they're in the dark all day long.
Yep.
They have the high ground. In order to get to them, you got to go through their main grow. There's no way to sneak up. They're against a cliff, but they have an escape hatch out the back. They have a chopped AK, kind of lying low out the door that looks right at the main trails you got to come into. So a team that hasn't done a lot of this, just running into this stuff for the first time, it's a melee. And then seeing in that last gunfight we were involved in where our canine helped keep my lead handler and all of us, safe that day, the two guys that were heavily armed at the top of the mountain we hadn't got to yet through the grow site, they had bugged out, but all their weaponry was there and their fortified position was like, okay, yeah, these are the tactic types. These are the guys that would have had to be handled. Even if we had gone into it, it would have been a challenge.
Yeah.
If we had made it that far up, and it would have been a long day looking at what we were going to walk into because they had the tactical savviness to set up their field craft geographically, and they had tons of cover and concealment. The same thing we saw when my partner was shot in 2005.
Where are they learning that from?
A little bit of Mexican military, the Los Zetas, who were trained by our special forces in the early 90s. And then kind of turned corrupt and became their own gang. Some of those guys are embedded in with these groups just to oversee these grow sites to make sure that, people aren't within the organization on the take in case there's a rival, cell to cell. And, we're fairly certain that when we were ambushed in 2005, that was one of those guys or two of those guys of the two gunmen that were there, at least two that we know of. One that was that we basically neutralized and the other one that slipped out. But, one of them had shot my partner. We don't see that in every single grow site, fortunately. We always find weapons. We always find knives and guns and things like that. But, 8, 9 out of 10 times, they don't want to take on, a tactical unit that's doing their thing. They're getting in stealthy. The dogs are good. We all hunt and fish, so we like to sneak around. I mean, we're getting tight at what we do. And they're giving up and they're running or they're giving up. But it's those aggressive crews that are holding their ground, and for whatever reason, it just might be the mindset of that particular part of the organization.
I tell you what, though, you add high ground with just a little bit of tactical savvy and some firepower.
They got you.
And you're in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, since the deal, since the days of sticks and stones, if I can get
right.
a little bit of elevation over the top of you, you're going to have a substantial problem.
Yep.
What year did you guys start rolling body armor?
Oh, man. I had body armor on patrol right out of the academy. So I was running like level 3A Kevlar, under
soft or hard?
It was all soft.
Yeah, that's not stopping a rifle
round. Yeah, that's not stopping a rifle round. That's 9mm maybe. Stop my 40.
Yep.
But we started running plates right after the 05 shootout.
Yep.
Right after the 05 shootout. And they were heavy, But then by the time we were forming this unit up,
they got better. The technology
they
advanced.
got great, and working a lot with ex-team guys like yourself and current team guys and what you guys were using, and having a 20-year veteran of the SEAL teams on our team that I could pick and bring into patrol, who went into being a game warden after his time on the teams. Obviously having that and looking back on his experiences, and Frog, who he's codenamed in the book, he had a lot to contribute to what we should and shouldn't do. And then we all brought kind of something to that whole piece of the pie. But finally, when we started to get the funds and the support to get the good stuff, by the time
ceramics, get some nods.
Yeah. We were running all good MBGs, a lot of night ops.
Yeah.
We were running, and I mean, there's some of this level 4 ceramic plate. It's less than 2 pounds of plate.
Amazing.
Ventilated, nice. We can piecemeal them on the kit.
Yep. Did you encounter any, or did you ever find any night vision from the growers?
We did, rudimentary stuff.
Probably towards the tail end, I would imagine.
Towards the tail end, a lot of single handheld scopes, a lot of monos. Didn't see anything more higher end that you or I would be familiar with, kind of state-of-the-art stuff. But what we did start to see about 5 years ago was start of body armor. They were starting to get their own body armor. And where they were getting it, who knows?
Internet.
I
mean, to be honest, if you have a credit card and
you can buy a
Wi-Fi connection. You can
buy a used,
unfortunately,
second chance or whatever. But we would see these body armor plates, bro, that were set up where they wouldn't wear the whole vest because it's so hot when they're, out there harvesting or tending or whatever. But they would put it in kind of a satchel and carry it like a satchel bag where they can like move it around. It was just weird stuff. Wouldn't be really effective, but we were seeing some pretty strange tactics of how they were adapting to being very physical, working in the heat of the day, and then trying to always having a long rifle on their shoulder or having a pistol in the hip. Everything from some of the counter canine tactics. They really started to realize, man, there are some really, really cool dogs stepping up. And it started with our canine Phoebe, who, and I know a mutual team friend of ours, Mike Ritland, when we talked on Mic Drop, and he first had his phone conversation with me to hear about this because Terry had introduced us, Hugh, and Mike said, wait a minute, what's this dog? How many bites did she have? 116 bites? Apprehension bites? In California?
Yeah.
And then I said, yeah, Mike, and she had like 800, 900 other arrests where the guys gave up. And she died at 13 of leukemia, but she worked till almost 12. And he goes, well, we got to talk. I don't know many war dogs that have ever done that, man, overseas. And I go, and the whole thing was, and a female, you guys really favor some of these female Belgian Mals. And I said, we find it's like the Goldilocks dog, man. You don't quite want a hard war dog, but you don't want a light biter. You want them just right. And she became one of those amazing dogs, as friendly as my yellow lab or, your hunting dog. But people started to realize, other agencies, but also the bad guy side went, man, we don't want to see these guys, man, because they don't let us run away anymore. And if they can't catch us with their running teams, these dogs are hitting us at 30 miles an hour, and they're going under brush, and they're not overheating, and we never hear them coming.
They're almost impossible to escape.
Yeah, it's amazing how good those dogs elevated our game and kept us safe. And after Phoebe kind of set the tone, the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, our sheriff's buddies at Santa Clara, we got them kind of tuned up and helped get them their first dog. And when all that started to happen, man, it was just a beautiful thing from our effectiveness. On the bad side of it was the growers knew that. So they would start to adapt their tactics to, okay, well, under rules of engagement, if I got this dog coming at me, but I'm not pulling a gun on an officer, I don't think they think or blah, blah, blah. It isn't a threat to them. I'm going to take that bite. And I'm going to pull that 8 to 10 inch fixed blade, and I'm going to go for that jugular on that dog. And we lost some dogs on the federal side, and we came close to losing some of our dogs, but fortunately, by the good graces, we didn't. Phoebe was one of those dogs, man, that, she was in NFL concussion protocol probably 5 times in her career. I mean, she had been beat by rocks and, stabbed by stuff, but never fatally, shot at, but never hit. But fortunately, she made it to live her entire life, but a lot of dogs don't. So, and these guys are onto that. So we're, just like anything from a team standpoint, we're constantly evolving our tactics to play cat and mouse and adjust to where they're starting to get a leg up.
I tell you what, it's a bad day for somebody who, if I arrive on target and they think that I don't care about the dog as much as another teammate, and they think that they're going to get away with something, that's a shitty day for them.
That's a shitty day for them because there are brothers and sisters, man.
For sure.
They are amazing.
Those dogs save lives on both sides of the coin, too, like you mentioned
they
at the
do.
beginning. Yeah.
They do.
Tell me about the sniper program, because I know you're huge into to the long guns.
Yeah,
And honestly, again, if I were to think fishing game warden, I'm not going to associate a sniper team with that. It just the initial thoughts, you're like, what?
It doesn't add up. Yeah, it's like, okay, what are these guys trying to do? What are they trying?
Well, obviously
to do?
have fun. That makes sense to me.
Well,
I get that completely.
Yeah, the fun element for sure, right? Because we're shooters, right? You're a shooter, I know. The way that came about was we already had people in play that were trained. Obviously, I had Frog, back from, he was a 9-year active. When he was on active 9 years, he was a sniper all those years. 11 in the reserves, trained, snipers in the SEAL teams.
Yep.
Had him. I was a trained sniper. I was teaching sniping now. I was teaching basic and advanced schools with Santa Clara as part of their cadre because I had worked into certain good relationships and just done a lot of it with them. And we had 2 other post-certified basic and advanced snipers trained within agency already before Med even started. So we already kind of had the guys ready to go. And we had another young sniper to the team eventually later to have 5 on gun. But that was one of those things that as soon as the pilot program in 2013 went 6 weeks out of a 3-month program and the chief saw what we were doing, just documenting what we were doing, having all the guys on the team every day, working the dogs, moving all over the state, and actually documenting the stuff we weren't before and seeing the magnitude of the problem, putting up the numbers of plants eradicated, water diversions taken out, guns seized, bad guys caught, tons of waste taken out. They're like, okay, you don't need to justify this. We're not even going to let it go 3 months. By the end of this year, you guys will come up with the selection criteria and the training needed, the testing. January 1st, 2014, you guys are full speed operational, 4 headquarters, out of patrol, make it happen. That was great, but it was also surprising because we're in the middle of an operational test season. So we thought, okay, we got 3 months and we got to get our crap together.
Yep.
And I'd been the bird whispering in the ear. I said, this is the time that we should have that sniper unit. And for this reason, and not only for Met, but for Overwatch and the high-risk warrants we're doing for commercial wildlife by bus and everything we're roping in on collateral duty on active shooter. If we have another terrorism event, where Santa Clara, the military, Moffett Field, Sunnyvale, San Jose, Fresno, and they need another trained gun that knows the protocol, that can integrate with any sniper unit. This is just the way the world's going. I mean, take our personal needs of the team out. And the chiefs agreed. They said, okay, what would it take? I said, well, you've got the guys. It's not going to take much more money. We're already running. We've been an M14 agency forever. We had 144 mil-spec battle M14s that we got from the...
Which is an awesome gun, by the way.
Oh, man, Andy, it was good. You hit it, man. I liked my... I had a 19, I think it was 58. I researched the serial number on my Springfield.
We had them for my first 2 pre-9/11 platoons. They were awesome.
Weren't they great?
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, just bulletproof.
Yeah,
but
accurate as all hell too.
Oh, they were crazy for just a standard carbine. Not even accurized. We really liked them. We adjunct the 144 for our remainder officers with the M1A Scouts. Lesser quality, but we could get them to work right. 18-inch barrels. We chopped the 24-inch barreled or 22-inch barreled M14s to 18, recrowned them, made them as compact as possible. When the Met thing got started, as we started to integrate, a handful of us were given the blessing to put Veltor stocks on them, put aim points, trim them up, thin them down. Still big, still heavy. Not a tight knit brush gun, but hey, bulletproof will always go bang, so we ran them. And then we needed to do something different. We needed light systems and optics. We just needed a complete package. And we tested a bunch of weapons, a bunch of us on the firearms committee for our agency back around 2006. And, it was POF, it was FN, it was HK, it was Bravo Company, it was everybody. We tested 5.56, stayed with 308 7.62, which we were kind of leaning towards for the bigger animal issues and for the brushy penetrating conditions that we needed on Met stuff.
Yep.
And SIG 716 was just out of the gate. It wasn't quite fully ready for production, as good as that system is. So it entered the testing. Frank DeSoma's POF, the P308 from the piston driver out of Arizona, and then FN came into our bid. HK didn't want to do a smaller package with Cerakoted color. We had a pretty tight setup of what we wanted on this kit. And as we went through the testing of all those weapons, the SIG unfortunately didn't make it as well as it shot. After 2 failures in certain areas, it just didn't make bid. Frank's gun came in, it ran a 6,000 round torture test, fine, it made it. And then the FN was the next highest, expensive, the more expensive gun by a couple hundred for the package that we would have went to had the POF not made it. So we ended up with the POF. Because we had these guns with those Rock 5R barrels on them, they were getting pretty good accuracy. With good ammunition, they were getting 1 MOA, sometimes better if you were doing your part on a short, 14.5 inch barrel.
That's good.
Compact. It had the weight still, but it was much more M4 sized. And because we didn't have the ability with an agency to like, okay, now that we have a sniper team, we can go to Accuracy International, or we could go to FN, or we could go to HK, and we had to stay within the gun that we had selected because it was a very involved bureaucratic process to even go to the POF as a standard patrol gun over the M14, given the cost of these weapons and given the state spending concerns at the time. I mean, legislatively, we had to justify everything we did and politic it just to get the gun over to an AR platform. So we had these POFs working for patrol. They were working for MET. Great. And all I knew I had to do was just optics, night vision. We knew we needed a sniper gun that was compact because we hike a lot. We go in, we could be at 14,000 feet below Whitney one day. We could be on the deserts of Santa Cruz or the coast, down in the Imperial Desert, on the border, always in brushy, thick stuff. I knew when we built it that we would want those guys on a long gun, a scoped optic gun for DMO or sniper use to be able to integrate into entry and use that gun as one platform. So it was kind of unique. So we just used the POF and we upgraded to Mark IV Leopolds. We use TMRs, just like a mil dot train on mills. It's just easy. We don't go any more crazy than that right now. And then have a night vision capability on that we can get on that gun, and they've worked well.
What kind of distances you guys shoot to or train to?
We will shoot to 1,000, but we will really. The biggest thing is 600 yards.
Yeah.
For a little platform like that,
yeah.
At the slower velocity when you're chopped under 16 inches, torso hits at 600 you can do with that little gun, which is really comfortable.
Plus, it's probably going to be tough for you guys to get even 600 yards of visibility in some of these environments.
It's tough. We've gone where we've had to observe a little further.
Yeah.
But mostly it's just overwatch, and using good optics. And then, we started to play with the 338. Santa Clara went to the 338 Lapua on an AI chassis, and they took all their 308s that were buzztails and went to AIs for their 308s, and we said, well, if we had to go to something really big and go really long distance and we were covering a lot of territory, we'd go to a bolt gun. But really, we need to stay with a gas gun for the mobility and the basically the versatility. Yeah. Because of where we're working. So, but it was good. It was good to have that. And of all the deployments we had on Delta Team, and my guy, and I see the team periodically and still talk to them and hear what's going on. The sniper team's active.
It's good.
They're out covering people's asses every other mission. It's cool.
It's a good capability to have, and it feels great to know that there's a long gun overwatching you.
It is, right? And from say the Santa Cruz Mountains, a lot of times we just hike in blind in the early days. And granted, a lot of those sites, man, it's going to be hard to get overwatch, but just knowing if you have a long gunner and a DMO guy
helps.
In 2 stacks, and you can peel them off real quick when you have that to cover an open field, even for just a 100-yard gap when you feel naked out there, it totally helps. And we didn't have that till we built this team in 2014. So I was very grateful to our administration for letting us do it.
It's cool that they saw the benefit.
They did.
I can see some administrations pushing back.
Yeah, and it was timing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was certainly timing with who was there believing in us at the time. And I talked a little bit about this on Joe's, but when you got guys like Mike Carey on, who knew me from the academy, mentored me as an instructor, I taught with him on the side, and you have middle-level administrators that came from the teams or had a special operations background and care about the environment. They don't see it as too foreign. And honestly, we kind of softened the blow of it being unconventional because they just got used to us being so unconventional for 5 years. So they're like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
Oh, a sniper team. Oh, okay. Tell me, justify it.
How much is this going to cost?
How much is this going to cost? And, and that was the other thing. You just hit it on the head with cost. That will sink a program.
Oh, yes, it will.
In our very thrift little agency. But we had like a great foundation in California Wildlife Officers Foundation. They're called KWAF. And we have our retired Chief Nancy on it. We have our retired Director Ryan Broderick on it. We have a lot of, hardcore conservationists with resources that put up a lot of money to buy new canines when dogs retire, canines when they got to go to surgery if they're injured, gear. I mean, that organization really made the sniper program possible by night vision, optics, when we went to scoped optics and finding, everything from building the right cleaning kit, and a Pelican case and having that turnkey kit where you can dial in and go.
Yeah, full sweep,
different ammo, all of that. So organizations like KWAF helping us out because we didn't have the money.
Yeah,
they got to come from outside supporters, and we had private donors too that really helped out with that. So it made it happen. And once it's in. Everybody sees the benefits. It's just getting over that hurdle. It's
amazing how it comes down to dollars and cents most
dollars
times.
and cents, man. And someone saying, okay, you're not that crazy cowboy. We believe in you enough to say, let's do this. Don't prove me wrong. And so we were
whispered on don't fuck me on this.
Yeah.
On the way out of the office.
Yeah,
I swear to God, I'll kill you.
I'm 2 years from retirement. I've invested everything in trusting you. Don't let me down.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Tell me about your new book.
Yeah, this is your copy right here, bud. This is Hidden War. It's just came out in April. And it's just been a fun one to put together because it's about the specialized MET team, which is all game wardens, all the brothers, that I got to, groom up and be part of and learn from and all those different things since the 2013 pilot program. And it really goes into missions that happened before that led to the justification of why this team was built, how it was built. It tells a lot of war stories. It goes into some of the gunfights, the K-9 deployments, and just some of the crazy environmental things we've seen, but it goes into the brotherhood, the bonds you and I love and remember, highlights of our careers, the politics, internal and external, and moving forward. What do we look at nationally as a country, for everything from sovereignty, public safety protection, environmental purity. It goes into all those things. So fun read. Interesting to write and relive some of those moments, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's doing well, and people are very well received right now. We're lucky to have both sides of the spectrum. I mean, and the legitimate cannabis industry is all about this. They have
to see the illegal grows as a threat as well.
They hate it. And the other thing is the ones that are doing it organically and pride themselves on not stealing water, loving their wildlife, having these really, dialed in grow sites. And there's a percentage of growers doing it right and protecting wildlife as avidly as we do. And they become allies. And they've actually termed our team their Earth Warriors, which is a different kind of name, you don't really think of, but
that sounds very Santa Cruz-y, if I'm
Santa
being honest.
Cruz-y? Yeah, it would be Santa Cruz meets Humboldt and and everything in the middle,
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool because we really needed to make sure when we wrote this, or when I wrote it, and the publishers, I made it clear. I go, look, it's not an anti-cannabis book. It cannot be seen as that because it's not. It's an anti-environmental crime, anti-threat to public safety book as it affects every American, not just California, but stories from California of how it affects the nation. So, yeah.
Did you ever think you were going to be an author?
No, I never did.
Now you got 2 under your belt. You got a third planned?
I don't know yet. I was
listening,
it's just
finishing up the documentary with Joe the other day. I'm like, you have this documentary aspirations. I heard the word producer come out of your mouth.
Oh my gosh.
What are you getting into?
Yeah, it's, you know what? The whole cannabis thing has it's gone in a direction, brother, that I would have never imagined. Yeah. If you said in 1992, in 15 years, you're going to be co-developing and working with a specialized unit, doing helicopter assaults and K-9s and running just, more special operations military SWAT style and not doing the traditional stuff anymore, I'd said, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. The mind wasn't ready for that at the time. And it's interesting when you ask about being an author. I never planned to write anything from the standpoint of a book until after that first shooting happened in 2005, because I was asked by people that were saying, what happened was I wrote a paper for the department on a debrief of that incident. And I written it, it was easy to read like a story, but it got into all the breakdowns where we could improve, what we need to do differently. And when that came out and people in conservation publications that were working very closely with our agency, they said, there's a lot more stories you guys have had since this came out. People need to know this. And, no one in DEA, no one in drug agencies are really document anything from this, and to come from a game warden's perspective, that's really different.
Yeah, it is.
But everybody sees it on the environmental side. So that's what prompted the first book. When we got that book deal, and Nancy at the time was our chief, and I broke the news. I said, "Yeah, I have a really, really good opportunity. How do we do this? Because obviously I'm with an agency umbrella, still working." She goes, "Hey, I'm really proud. This is great. Let's just look it over and make sure we have the right pictures and do what we got to do." And that started some of the awareness and kind of led to this coming out later.
It's awesome to get that kind of support from your organization.
It is. It is. I feel honestly blessed, man, and kind of surreal that it happened the way it did. And again, like I said before, I think things were meant to happen for a reason at certain times. And where I'm the kind of guy that, wants to overdo everything when there's an issue out there, and I know I'm, again, like-minded, right?
Yep.
If there's something we can do, we're going to do it better. And, if it's an issue that needs to be handled right now, especially for our wildlife, I want to do it yesterday. I don't want to wait 5 years for bureaucracy, and I think that frustrated a lot of my leadership. But having the right people that believed in us at the right time, when it was kind of a breaking point that we're all in or we're all out. Because if we stay halfway in the middle, people are going to die. No exaggeration. We're going to get hurt.
Yep.
We got lucky when my partner survived. That was shocking, actually, with what we encountered that day in 2005. So that being said, we got lucky with the right people at the right time. And when we had that opportunity, we that built the team knew 110, go until we drop, man. We got to do the best we could. And I feel really lucky that, knowing that was the last 5 or 6 years of my career when this thing got green lit, it was a 5-year plan to really make it successful and, more importantly, tell the story. And thank you very much for being part of telling the story and being a conservationist out there, brother, and helping this, because this affects all of us, and it's good to have you on our side.
It's my pleasure, man. I'm so stoked that we got to sit down and talk.
Super cool.
I'll let you close it out, man. Anything you want to close with?
Just want to say thanks, and I want to give a shout out right now to all of my brothers and sisters on the Met team out there right now, going hardcore every day of the summer.
They're working up here right now. Season's open.
Season's open, yeah. Yeah.
Well, not that they're not working the other days, but now they got a lot of hunters out in the field, probably more than normal.
Yeah. And one thing, if anyone is interested in the book, it's on Amazon. All of them are. You can also get signed copies. Just hit me on Instagram or go to my website, which is johnnorris, JOHNNORES.com.
And I'll put all that up on the show notes.
That'd be cool, because what a lot of people have wanted is they're like, I know you're not going to be on the East Coast for a while. I'd really like a signed copy. I work that out. Yep. We just ship them. People pay a few extra bucks for shipping with personal message. If people have questions about being a game warden, going into the profession, they're not sure. Since a lot of these good podcasts with you and our mutual friends have happened, a lot of new game warden interest, man. It's so cool to see.
Isn't it beautiful?
So I am answering questions 24/7 right now on Instagram of just guiding people in the right direction. Reach out anytime for any of that. And we are doing some documentary film stuff related to this topic.
Producing, it's no big deal.
It's just somehow I got roped into that.
I heard that. I'm like, oh, he's gonna pay.
And he's like, I got him. He did it. Yeah, no,
Hollywood.
on that, yeah, Hollywood Norris. What's he doing?
Yeah.
But that thing I talked a little bit on Joe's because it just really kind of blown up was Altered State, and it's really a documentary film. I mean, kind of like a Dust to Glory, if you think of something like that, on the environmental issues of cannabis as they relate on all levels in California. So embedded with law enforcement teams, legitimate growers, outlaw growers, all the environmental issues, the politics, and some pretty crazy stuff I'm not really going to talk about yet.
Yeah, save some surprise.
That's never been seen, and stuff we're seeing through filming the last year and a half. It'll be good stuff.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. Thanks for the time, man. Thanks for
man.
making the drive.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.